I still remember the email notification. All hands meeting, mandatory, 9:30 a.m., main conference room. It came in at 8:12 on a Thursday morning. Too early for anything good. My stomach dropped the moment I saw it. I'd worked in corporate long enough to know that tone. No subject line, no details, just urgency wrapped in vague professionalism. The kind of message that doesn't say layoffs, but screams it anyway. My name is Samantha Ray. I'm 34, and for the past 8 years, I worked at Delta Core Solutions, a mid-sized tech firm in Portland. Or rather, I lived there. I was the one who stayed late when servers went down, who skipped lunches to review compliance documents, who quietly retrained employees when onboarding dropped the ball. When the pandemic hit and everyone else panicked, I learned new systems overnight, updated our protocols by hand, and kept the place afloat. But on that Thursday morning, none of it mattered. I walked into the conference room and felt the hush immediately. People sat stiffly, coffee cups clutched tightly like talismans. No one made eye contact. I sat near the back, my heart thudding so loudly I could barely hear the soft murmur of nervous whispers around me. Then the doors opened, and in walked Alan Reese, our chief operating officer, flanked by 2 HR reps. That's when it became real. "Thank you for joining us this morning," Alan began, like this was just another company update. "Today we've made the incredibly difficult decision to initiate a round of workforce reductions." He paused as if expecting sympathy. "This is part of a necessary restructuring as we align our budgets with future growth strategies." I wasn't shocked by the layoff itself. I'd heard the rumors like everyone else. What stunned me was when I checked my email 5 minutes later and saw the subject line, "Your employment status." And there it was. My name was on the list. First. I sat there frozen, reading the sterile paragraph over and over, unable to breathe. After everything I'd done, the extra hours, the missed birthdays, the Sunday nights spent fixing data mismatches, they didn't even have the decency to speak to me in person. I'd worked double shifts. I'd fixed critical bugs before they made it to launch. I was the only one in the company with a current Level 3 compliance certification, a credential they begged me to get, then never reimbursed me for. I stood up, slowly, aware that people were watching. Some had tears in their eyes. A few looked guilty, but no one said anything. At my desk, there was already a cardboard box waiting. Security didn't escort me, a tiny mercy, I guess. But as I packed up 8 years of my life, I couldn't stop shaking. Family photos. A stress ball shaped like a server tower. The coffee mug I won for Employee of the Quarter. Twice. 8 years, gone in 6 paragraphs. No severance package. Just 2 weeks insurance coverage and an offer to assist with my transition. The worst part? I didn't cry. I wanted to. I wanted to scream, slam a chair against the wall, demand answers. But all I did was nod. Quietly, like a professional. Like someone who hadn't just been gutted. When I stepped out into the gray Oregon drizzle, I wasn't just unemployed. I was untethered. Everything I had built my identity around, loyalty, hard work, being the one who held it all together, had just been treated like it meant nothing. I put the box in my car and sat behind the wheel for a long time. No music, no calls, just silence. I stared at my reflection in the rain-smeared window, and for the first time in a long time, I saw someone exhausted, used, discarded. But then, as the shock began to fade, something else began to rise. A quiet fury. Not rage, not revenge. Clarity. They didn't let me go because of budget cuts. They let me go because I made things look easy. Because I trained the team so well they thought I could be replaced by the people I mentored. Because I never asked for credit, never made noise, and never threatened to leave. They thought they'd won. They had no idea what was coming. Because 2 weeks before they blindsided me with that email, I had a conversation. One I hadn't told anyone about yet. Not even my closest friend in the company. It was with a recruiter from Calum Tech, a global cybersecurity and compliance firm. And as I sat there in my car, still clutching the layoff notice, my phone buzzed with a new message. Hi, Samantha. Congrats again. Legal has finalized your contract. We'd love to schedule onboarding for Monday. Welcome to Calum Tech 6 Figures. Full benefits, remote flexibility, a role built around the very skills Delta Core had taken for granted. I closed my eyes and let out a breath. They thought they were punishing me. But what they'd actually done was set me free. The Monday after my layoff, I woke up at 6:30 a.m. out of habit. No alarm, just muscle memory. For 8 years, that time meant brewing coffee, reviewing the ticket backlog, checking my team's schedules, and prepping for yet another urgent compliance meeting that should have been solved months ago. But that morning, I sat still at the kitchen table. No rush, no emails, no panicked Slack messages. Just the silence of my small Portland apartment. And the contract for my new job at Calum Tech, still sitting on the counter. I didn't sign it yet. Not because I had doubts, but because part of me needed time to mourn. Not the company. That was long gone. I was mourning who I had to become to survive in a place that never saw me. Back when I started at Delta Core, I was just 26. I'd landed the job after getting certified in risk and compliance systems. Not exactly a glamorous field, but one that required meticulous thinking, nerves of steel, and most of all, accountability. I was eager, sharp, hungry to prove myself. And for a while, I did. I stayed late to fix botched reports. I found discrepancies in regulatory filings that saved us from audit fines. I volunteered to mentor new hires. I was the go-to, the reliable one. You know what happens to the reliable one? They get buried in expectations. At first, it felt like trust. I was looped into high-level meetings, CC'd on everything. But soon I was doing everything. Writing documentation that wasn't mine. Fixing code I didn't break. Picking up calls after hours, just in case. When someone missed a deadline, I handled it. When a new hire was floundering, Samantha, can you just shadow them for a week? By year 4, I was basically running onboarding for the entire compliance division. Unofficially, of course. No title change. No raise. Just a slow shift into invisibility. My manager, Drew, always said the same thing. We know how valuable you are, Sam. You're the glue. Glue. I hated that word. Glue holds everything together. Quietly, messily, unseen. And when it breaks, people don't blame the load. They blame the glue. I wasn't resentful at first. I told myself it would pay off. That loyalty meant something. Then came the new hires. Fresh out of grad school, underqualified, overconfident, and assigned directly to me. Samantha, can you train Jason on the compliance dashboard? Samantha, just loop Priya in. She'll be shadowing you. At one point, I was training 4 people while still doing my actual job, but it was a conversation from about 6 months before the layoff that stayed with me. It was after hours, and Drew had stopped by my desk while I was still typing out a critical client compliance report. You know, if we had 5 more Sams, this place would run itself. I gave a tired smile. Then maybe you'd let one of them have weekends off. He laughed. I didn't. Later that week, I submitted my first request for a compensation review. I outlined my certifications, project metrics, and team development work. I attached glowing client emails, positive audits, and even included market salary comparisons. Drew's reply came 48 hours later. Unfortunately, we're not in a position to adjust salaries this quarter. Let's revisit this in 6 months. 6 months later, I sent a follow-up. No reply. Instead, 2 months after that, I got an email asking me to lead compliance training for the entire company. No title. No bonus. Just more hours. More unpaid labor. I did it anyway. Because I still had hope. I still believed that showing up, really showing up, mattered. I didn't know it then, but that was the final test. And I passed it. Just not in the way they expected. The recruiter from Calum Tech reached out shortly after that training session. She'd been forwarded one of the internal guides I'd written. Anonymously, of course. It had circulated among their consultants as a gold standard in practical compliance rollout. They wanted to talk. I took the call. Quietly. Cautiously. I told myself it was just a conversation. But the moment I spoke to their director of operations, I realized how much I'd been starving. Not just financially, but professionally. He knew what my certifications meant. He asked about the systems I'd patched. He valued the quiet work no one else ever saw. And then I got the offer. 6 figures. Leadership title. My own team. It felt surreal. I hadn't accepted it yet when the layoff came. But when it did, it was like the universe answered for me. All those years I thought I was too essential to be discarded. But they had never valued me, only what I could do for them. And now, they were about to find out what happened when the glue walks away. Because 2 weeks later, almost to the day, Delta Core's compliance systems failed. And there was only one person who knew how to fix them, and she had just signed her contract with someone else. The email went out at 2:47 p.m. on a Wednesday. Subject, urgent compliance system error. It was forwarded to me later by a former coworker, but at that moment I was already sipping an iced coffee across town, sitting in a sleek glass office with my new Calum Tech badge clipped to my blazer. It had been 9 days since I left Delta Core. 9 days since I quietly packed up my desk, smiled at the receptionist, and walked out of that building for the last time. It felt like a lifetime ago. But for them, the real nightmare had just begun. Inside Delta Core's 7th floor office, panic was setting in. The compliance dashboard, the core system tracking client certifications, regulatory deadlines, and audit documentation had gone down. Not partially, fully. No access, no backups loading, no functioning escalation path. The issue wasn't just technical, it was operational. The new team had deployed an update to the internal tracking system. The same system I had manually patched and maintained for 6 years. It was never meant to be automated blindly. The protocols were too nuanced, too dependent on knowing the quirks and exceptions we'd built around client-specific regulations. But I was gone, and no one else knew the map. I got the first text from Jenna, one of the few people who'd reached out after the layoffs. "Are you hearing what's happening at Delta Core? It's a disaster." Then Thomas, from IT, messaged me. "Compliance system down. No one can even explain what went wrong. Drew looks like he's aged 10 years in an hour." I didn't reply, not because I didn't care. A small part of me still did. But because I knew better than to get emotionally pulled back in. I'd spent years being their backup plan, their patch, their fixer. And where had that gotten me? Laid off, without warning, without gratitude. Number this time, they would face it without me. By Thursday morning, word had spread. 3 major clients were threatening to pause contracts. One, a government-adjacent tech firm, had already frozen operations pending audit confirmation. I heard Drew had locked himself in his office, frantically flipping through old email chains and half-written process manuals I'd left behind. The problem? I never documented the fail-safes. I couldn't. The system wasn't designed for it. Half the fixes I'd done were hard-coded overrides built over years of trial, error, and emergency intervention. They hadn't just let go of an employee. They had deleted their institutional memory. By noon, I got a call. Unknown number, but I recognized the voice immediately. "Hi, Samantha. It's Drew." There was a pause. I could hear tension in his voice. I waited. How are you?" he asked. The sheer awkwardness of that small talk after everything made me want to laugh, but I kept my tone neutral. "I'm well, settling into the new position." "Listen," he said, quickly shifting gears. "I won't waste your time. We've had some issues with the compliance dashboard. You were the only one who really understood how the override system worked, and I was wondering if—" "Drew," I said gently, "I no longer work at Delta Core." I know, he rushed. "I'm not asking for anything big. Just maybe a call? Walk us through some of the old patches, or—" I let the silence hang for a second longer than was comfortable. "I'm not trying to be difficult," I said, "but I did ask for compensation for this work. For years. You remember that, don't you?" He went quiet. "Now, I'm leading the compliance architecture team at Calum Tech," I continued, "and I'm building something better, cleaner, sustainable." "I get it," he muttered. "No, Drew, I don't think you do," I said, keeping my voice even. "You didn't value the system while it worked because you never saw how fragile it was. And now that it's broken, you're realizing the cost." He exhaled sharply. "Is there anyone else we could talk to? Anyone you trained who could help?" That part broke me a little. Because yes, I trained half the team. I wrote the guides. I answered the late-night texts. But none of them had the experience. They weren't ready. And worse, they had been too afraid to speak up when I was dismissed. I gave him the cleanest answer I could. "You're going to need to rebuild it from scratch, and I suggest hiring a team who won't treat your best people as disposable next time." The call ended shortly after that. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady, like I had finally drawn a line in the sand between who I was, the glue that held a broken system together, and who I was becoming, the architect of something new. At Calum Tech, I was being invited to redesign a nationwide compliance platform. They trusted me, listened to me, paid me fairly. My calendar wasn't filled with emergencies. It was filled with strategy. That night, as I looked out at the city lights from my balcony, I received one final message. It was from Jenna. "They brought in a consultant today. He told them it would take 4 to 6 months to rebuild what you did in-house. And that's just to get back to baseline." I typed a reply, then deleted it. Some things don't need a response. Let the silence speak. Because they hadn't just lost a system. They lost the one person who knew how to keep it from collapsing. And that finally wasn't my problem anymore. It wasn't until week 3 at Calum Tech that I finally started sleeping through the night. The insomnia had followed me like a shadow after the layoff. Not because I missed Delta Core, that chapter was closed. But because even in freedom, I carried the habits they'd hardwired into me. The urgency, the hypervigilance, the need to be useful. For the first time in years, no one needed me at 11 p.m. There were no frantic, just one more favor messages, no missing audit flags waiting for me to catch them. It was unsettling and healing. My team at Calum Tech was small but sharp, and they listened. During onboarding, I suggested a shift in how we structured internal compliance mapping, and instead of dismissing me, the CTO brought it up in a leadership meeting. It was implemented the same week. I wasn't used to that. Every day, I woke up waiting for the catch, waiting for someone to tell me I'd overstepped or been too ambitious, but it never came. Instead, I got Slack messages asking for my thoughts. I got credit in meetings. I got a full lunch hour, uninterrupted. When I sent an out-of-office email, people actually respected it. The scars didn't vanish, but they stopped itching. Still, something tugged at me. Maybe it was the text that kept trickling in from old Delta Core coworkers, people who had survived the layoffs but now felt like the floor was crumbling beneath them. "You were right, Samantha. They're overworking everyone. 3 people quit this week. No one trusts Drew anymore." They finally offered Priya a promotion, after 2 people left. She's furious. I didn't respond to all of them, but I read every word. Because I remembered what it felt like to sit at that desk, to hear the silence after advocating for yourself, to smile through resentment just to survive another day. That's when an idea started forming. On a quiet Friday afternoon, I walked into my new director's office and asked if I could spearhead a mentorship initiative, one focused on career transition support for under-recognized compliance professionals. He blinked. "You want to mentor people? Outside the company?" "Yes," I said. "People who are stuck in broken systems. People like I used to be." To my surprise, he nodded almost immediately. "Put together a proposal. I'll support it." That weekend, I wrote the framework for a pro bono workshop series, 1 Saturday a month. Resume audits, interview prep. negotiation tactics, confidence building. I called it the Invisible Experts Project. Because too many of us work in silence, afraid to ask for more, afraid to leave, because we're told the glue doesn't matter. That being essential is enough reward. It isn't. 2 weeks later, I held the first session. 5 women from various industries joined the Zoom call. They were quiet at first, unsure if they belonged, unsure if they were allowed to want more. But by the end, one of them, a single mom named Janelle, said something I haven't forgotten. I thought I was failing because I was exhausted all the time, but maybe I'm just exhausted because I've been doing 3 people's jobs without credit. Exactly. That's the lie we're fed. That burnout is personal weakness, not systemic abuse. That loyalty is noble even when it's one-sided. That speaking up makes us difficult. It doesn't. It makes us free. After that session, I received a LinkedIn message from someone I hadn't expected. Priya, the junior analyst I'd trained during my last year at Delta Corps. Hi, Samantha. I heard about the workshop. I'd love to join. Also, I just gave my notice. You helped me see I deserved better. Thank you. I stared at the message for a long time. Not because I was surprised, but because I realized something important. They'd tried to erase me, discard me like a broken part. But I hadn't just built systems. I'd built people. People who now saw their own value. That was the real legacy. And the more I embraced that truth, the more I understood the difference between leaving quietly and leaving with purpose. I hadn't burned a bridge. I'd lit a torch and handed it to the next person still in the dark. It was a gray Tuesday morning when I saw the subject line. Urgent request? Contracted assistance? It came from a Delta Corps email address, but not Drew's. This one was from a name I hadn't heard in over a year. Karen Voss, the company's chief legal officer. I opened the message slowly, half curious, half expecting more corporate cleanup. Hi, Samantha. I hope this finds you well. I'm reaching out regarding a critical compliance situation. Our external consultants have advised that portions of our legacy system cannot be restored without direct input from the original architect. Based on our records, that's you. We understand you're no longer with Delta Corps, and we respect that. However, we'd like to discuss a potential contracted engagement with appropriate compensation to help stabilize our systems before Q4 filings. Please let us know if you're open to a conversation. Karen Voss, Chief Legal Officer. I read it twice, then a third time. There it was, the final act. Not a demand, not a guilt trip. A request. Polite. Careful. Professional. From someone far higher up than Drew. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even tempted. I just felt something settle. Like a book being closed after years of rereading the same painful chapter. By now, Delta Corps had lost 3 major clients. Their internal reviews had flagged multiple compliance breaches, and their external audit report, which I got a glimpse of through a friend in the industry, was scathing. They didn't want me back out of respect. They wanted me back because I was the only one who could fix what they had broken. The irony wasn't lost on me. I didn't reply right away. I spent the day thinking. Not because I needed the job. I didn't. Calum Tech was thriving, and my mentorship initiative, the Invisible Experts Project, had grown faster than I imagined. I just wanted to be sure. That night, I sat on my balcony again, the same place I had stared into the quiet the day I was laid off. The city below me was alive with lights, and inside, my inbox was filled with messages from mentees landing interviews, negotiating raises, and walking away from toxic jobs with their heads held high. I wasn't who I was a year ago, and I wasn't going back. The next morning, I replied, "Hi, Karen. Thank you for your message. I appreciate the outreach, but I must respectfully decline. While I understand Delta Corps' current challenges, I believe my departure and the circumstances surrounding it offered an important lesson about valuing internal talent before they become external assets. I wish you the best as you move forward with your consultants. Samantha Ray." No bitterness, no ego, just truth. A few hours later, I got a short response. Understood. Thank you for your time. KV. I didn't need more. Closure doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it comes quietly. Like finally stepping off a path that only led you in circles. 2 weeks after that, Calum Tech's board invited me to present our new modular compliance platform, a system I'd co-developed and would now lead into national deployment. At the end of the meeting, our CTO shook my hand and said, "This wouldn't have happened without you, Samantha. You didn't just help us build something, you helped change how we think about what leadership actually looks like." That stuck with me, because for years I thought leadership meant carrying everyone else, being the fixer, the last one out of the office, the quiet achiever. But real leadership? It's showing people their value before the breaking point. It's setting boundaries, not just picking up the slack. It's refusing to let your loyalty be weaponized against you. I used to think I was disposable. They made me believe that being useful was the same thing as being valued. But here, I wasn't just useful. I was seen. At the end of my presentation, I looked around that boardroom, at people who listened when I spoke, at systems built on trust, not desperation. And I realized I hadn't just found a new job. I had reclaimed my worth. One of my mentees, a woman named Leah who had recently left a hostile finance firm, said something in our last group session that brought tears to my eyes. I kept thinking I had to prove I was irreplaceable. But the truth is, I never was. I was just ignored. I told her what I had finally come to believe. You don't have to be irreplaceable to be valuable. You just have to believe that the right people will see you before it's too late. That's what Delta Corps never understood. They didn't lose me because I left. They lost me because they never believed I would. And by the time they realized what they had, I was already building something they'd never get access to again. Success isn't revenge. Self-respect is. And I had finally found mine.